Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, and of all the scenery in America, from deserts to beaches to forests, my favorite is mountains. And two parks with some of the most beautiful mountains in the world are Glacier and Denali. Today, I will be comparing the two parks and determining which one I think is better by the end. So for those who do not know, because many of you are pretty new to this channel and I appreciate all the recent support, especially thank you for 1,000 subscribers. The fact that we got to that goal so quickly is really unbelievable. But I am making this park battle because I have not done a national park battle since the new support came in, and I want to see how you guys feel about this kind of video. So with that out of the way, I will give an introduction of each park, compare certain aspects of them, and declare a winner at the end. Let's introduce Glacier. Glacier in Montana is one of the most amazing national parks I've ever been to. You have Going to the Sun Road as quite possibly the best scenic drive anywhere in the nation. With a load of wildlife, tons of mountains, waterfalls, lakes, rivers, and so many incredible opportunities for hiking and so much more. I enjoy doing things like Granite Park Chalet and going to some of the deeper parts of this park, as there is a lot of unique wilderness that I think is just something that makes this park stand out. The park does get quite a few visitors, especially in summer when it's really open, but that's because of just how amazing the park is. Now for Denali. Denali is a park that I think does not have as many incredible, noteworthy sights as Glacier, whereas you've heard of so many things from Glacier. You've pretty much just heard of the mountain at Denali. But Denali is, in my opinion, the most beautiful mountain in the world. I've not seen every mountain, but its prominence and size, there's something about it. It's spectacular. The park also has practically unrivaled wildlife. The Big Five of Alaska are a pretty big part of it. There is hiking here. The Scenic Drive is certainly one that stands out. And of course, backcountry hiking is a big major thing here because you can climb the mountain. So both parks are definitely top tier. For me, they're both in the top 3 of all the national parks I've visited. And that is saying a lot. Which one is better? Let's start by comparing scenery. Glacier scenery is quite stunning. You have green, lush mountains, but at the tops, the peaks are rocky and snowy. So you have a really interesting color contrast. And despite the name Glacier, there are actually not a huge number of glaciers in the park compared to North Cascades and a couple other parks in the US. However, they do have Grinnell Glacier, and the overlook of Grinnell Glacier from Highline Trail, with a rainbow going over it when I went, was one of the most breathtaking views I've ever had in a national park. With areas like Lake McDonald and St. Mary Lake, and so many other places, some of the hikes you can take like Avalanche Lake, Hidden Lake, they're shorter trails but still lead to rewarding views. So this scenery is quite hard to top. But Denali might top it. You have the mountain itself, of course, which I already mentioned I think is the most beautiful mountain in the world, and probably, actually, the most beautiful sight of any national park in the world for me. You also have a lot of not as large mountains, but pretty large ones. Many different colors from yellows to greens. You have rivers, lakes, and of course the star is Denali, and it stands out because of its prominence, but the area surrounding it is also quite beautiful. So overall, which one is more beautiful in scenery? I pretty much have to declare it a tie. Denali is the best overall site, but Glacier has a high quantity of really incredible places to see. So it's pretty much right in the middle for scenery of these two. And going to either park for scenery alone is definitely worth it. But we should now discuss the hiking. And hiking is one where Denali is at a bit of a disadvantage. If we're talking solely trails, there's not a ton for what you could see in the park because the park is large. Third largest in the nation. Over 6 million acres of land. Twice Yellowstone's size, and probably 6 times Glacier's size. However, there's only, within the first 20 miles of the Scenic Drive, hiking trails, with the exception of a few along the main park road past that part. This is due to the fact that you can only access the Scenic Drive with a bus, or a bike, or hiking. So you can't drive your car on most of the Scenic Drive, but I'll get to that a little later. So something very important to note is the hikes they do have are not mountainous for the most part. You have the Savage River area, and that's where you get the most strenuous hikes really in the park. And they're not going to give you a whole lot of crazy Denali views like you might get further down the road. However, I think they are quite incredible trails for what they are, and actually really underrated and overlooked areas. Horseshoe Lake and Savage River are both very unique, and typically have quite a bit of wildlife on them. So I enjoy the hiking in this park. However, even with that, and also the Thoroughfare Ridge Trail, which gives excellent views of the mountain itself further up the road, Glacier does have the better hiking. Highline Trail is still to this day, I believe, my favorite trail of any park I've ever done. That's competing against the likes of things like Angel's Landing, Bright Angel Trail in Grand Canyon, and so much more. But Highline, you are high above the valley floor of the glacier, but there are still mountains towering above you. You're surrounded on all sides by breathtaking scenery, plenty of wildlife, and you can get to Granite Park Chalet along this trail, which is an unforgettable experience. If you stay there overnight, a sunset in Glacier is definitely something worth waiting for. So I absolutely think Glacier does have the better hiking. Now let's compare the other activity that one would most likely do in either park: driving. I will be mentioning the bus tours for this one, because going along the park road in both parks is major, as I believe these are the two best scenic drives in the nation. In Denali, you do not get to take your car past the 20-mile mark, so you have to take a bus or you can bike or hike, but many do the bus tour. And this bus tour, there are different options. I personally recommend the one that's like a shuttle bus and not a tour bus, because you can get off at different points, and as long as you don't go past a certain area, you'll be able to get back anywhere in time, and it's just as good in terms of stopping for scenery and seeing wildlife, so I do recommend that. And I don't love bus tours overall, and I can see where some would absolutely not tolerate it. However, I think being on a bus with a large amount of people for a long time is worth the views that you get. Because on this scenic drive, you will see tons of glaciers, mountains, rivers, lakes. Denali itself, to get a good view, you must take this road. And if you have to take the bus tour, I absolutely say take the bus tour. For Glacier, going to the Sun Road does have its own thing holding it back, and that's not that you have to take a bus tour, but that it is very difficult to get on this road. It is closed for the vast majority of the year. I believe it's usually only open from either late June or early July, or maybe even mid-July nowadays, to sometime in September. So you have a 2, maybe 3 month period to drive on this road, and it gets quite crowded when it is open. However, it is absolutely worth getting through crowds to see this road, because you are, just like on Highline Trail, above the mountains to an extent, but also below them enough that you can really enjoy it. There's waterfalls, there's just so many amazing views in this one. And I've seen several animals along this road. Both parks have quite a bit of wildlife on the roads, but in terms of scenic drive overall, I will say I personally prefer Denali. It's not because of the disadvantage either one has, but I personally think being able to drive up to Denali Peak is an even more spectacular sight and thing to do than going to the Sun Road. That said, going to the Sun Road is still probably top 2 drive in the country for anyone, and I see why many would consider it the best. But Denali Park Road does get my personal choice. Now to discuss the wildlife. Wildlife is an absolute strong suit of both parks. Discussing Glacier first, while there I saw black bears, grizzly bears, mountain goat, marmots, moose, and several other smaller animals, mainly birds that I would refer to for the smaller ones. There were some large birds like eagles, which is also an excellent sight, and a cool bird called a ruffed grouse that I liked a lot. Now, the other important thing to note is that Glacier, the wildlife, is sometimes very elusive. If you are looking for grizzly bears, it's not quite like Yellowstone where you're guaranteed to see a bison when you go. So I think in terms of wildlife, it's possible if you go you won't be seeing a ton of wildlife at Glacier. But for many people, it is very common to see awesome fauna. However, I do want to point out Denali, in comparison, is much more abundant in its wildlife. I think you're much more likely to see a large mammal at Denali than you are at Glacier. The Big Five in Alaska, that's a pretty major thing. 5 large mammals. These are grizzly bears, wolves, caribou, Dall sheep, and moose. In my visit to Denali, actually my 2 visits, I saw all of those animals with the exception of wolves. Caribou are quite abundant, and moose are abundant, especially actually on the first 20 miles of the road, so you do not have to take a bus tour to see a moose most likely. The grizzly bears, sometimes they're close, sometimes they're far away, and the Dall sheep are almost never anywhere near the main road. However, I do think there is more wildlife at Denali, because apart from those animals, you also have ptarmigans and red foxes, and so much more. So while both parks are strong in the wildlife department, I give Denali the edge. And the one other thing I want to mention about Denali is that I have done a Denali raft adventure. This is whitewater rafting on the Nana River, and I think it's some of the best whitewater rafting I've ever done in the world. So I would say that is an extra bonus, but because it is an outfitter that's technically not within the park, it's not something I wanted to really go into a whole section about. So overall, of these 2 spectacular parks, which one is the best? I give the edge to Denali. I think many would say Glacier. Granted, I don't think a lot of people, compared to those who have been to Glacier, have been to Denali, because Glacier is much more popular and easily accessible compared to Denali. However, if you are to go to only one, if you're going in any time of year, I recommend Glacier of the 2. The main reason is because Denali, in summer, the peak itself is quite hard to find. It is often cloudy. I've gotten lucky on my visits, but you are not going to be disappointed by any visit to Glacier, while Denali there's always that possibility. So if you have to go to one or the other, I would say Glacier, but in my personal experience, seeing Denali on a clear day is just too amazing of a sight to pass up, and overall, I think Denali is the park I prefer the most. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this comparison video. Please let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this type of content or something else, and please suggest any battle ideas you have. Subscribe to the channel for more content. I'll see you next time.